Albert Breer. He's Mr. Ratings for us. Monday morning quarterback, covered the NFL for 15 years. Okay, let's start with this. I said this about, these quarterbacks now, Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson. You can tell me that they're not healthy at the end of the year. You can tell me that Lamar's quarterback passer rating is plummeting. Here's what I know. Replaceability. Yep. Baltimore is a fourth-place team without Lamar, and the Cardinals are a fourth-place team without Kyler. So there's all this. I think the Ravens have to pay Lamar, and the Cardinals have to pay Kyler, and I think they have to do it now. You're always better to pay early than late. Where are we with the Cardinals and Lamar and their contracts?
Well, I can start with Lamar. I think the Ravens have really left this up to him, and I know they're going to be very careful about it. For those that don't know, Lamar doesn't have an agent. So this is going to be the Ravens negotiating directly with Lamar Jackson, and because of that, they've been really sensitive to his own level of trust with the team here. And that's why they're saying it's up to Lamar when he wants to sit down and talk, then we'll talk. And they're also, fully cognizant this isn't going to be a normal negotiation where you come in and you may lowball a player. You can't do that when you're talking directly to a player. So, I know this has been done on Lamar's timetable, and I'd assume things would ramp up in the summer. Kyler Murray's a little different. Obviously, he rattled cages earlier in the offseason.
Right.
He has been there. I think I told you this last week, Colin, at about 3 different points during the offseason. They've promised to do his deal this summer, so we'll see where that goes. But you're right. In both cases, there's no question the price has gone up over the last 6 months, and that's what always happens when you wait. Going into this offseason, there were only 3 quarterbacks making over $40 million a year. That number is now 6. And you have Aaron Rodgers over 50. And you have Derek Carr and Matthew Stafford over 40. And you have Deshaun Watson jumping from 40 to 46. And so by waiting, both the Ravens and Cardinals have cost themselves some money. The Cardinals did it by choice. Again, I think the Ravens have done it because they are very much working on Lamar Jackson's timeline.
It's a fluid situation, but it has really eroded quickly for Rusty Harden and Deshaun Watson. I said last Friday when Harden said what he said about nothing being illegal, I said it's time to shut it down. Roger Goodell, I think, would have the backing of other owners who were furious when he gave Deshaun Watson a fully guaranteed contract. My gut feeling is now I would not be shocked, and I would, in agreement, down the line, if you shut Deshaun Watson down for the season, do you think that's possible?
I think it's possible. Now, Roger already said because there aren't criminal charges here that they aren't going to use the commissioner's exempt list, which would essentially, put him on paid leave, which more or less he was last year too. But I do think it could affect what happens with the suspension. And the key part, when it comes to the 24th lawsuit that makes it different than the previous 33, the league and the Browns have already gone through the depositions of the previous 22, of the first 22. And then the 23rd, they knew it was coming. My understanding is this 24th lawsuit is a little bit different. And I think what's going to be key here is what Deshaun Watson told the NFL's investigators and what Deshaun Watson told the Browns and how open he was about this 24th case and how much this is catching the league and the Browns by surprise. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure whether or not the team or the league was apprised that this could come, that this was an issue for Deshaun Watson. But I think the level to which the league and the Browns are surprised by this is going to be a factor, because if this is coming out of nowhere for them, I think there's a good chance the league looks at Deshaun and says, we can't have this. You looked at us in the eye and you told us what happened and you left this part out of it. And so, I certainly think the 24th lawsuit could be a factor when it comes to their decision-making here. And that's beyond even just the PR element, which we always know is a factor.
So Deebo Samuel is going to attend Niners mandatory camp. So it's interesting. He doesn't want to be used how they're using him, but if they did pay him what he wanted to, he would probably accept the way they're using him. If he went to another team and they paid big money, they would probably duplicate at some level the way the Niners used him. So listen, he has huge value, but he is a physical player who has had 7 or 8 great games in a row. That doesn't mean he's always been great there. I think he's a hard player to pay a fortune to, because your other great offensive player, George Kittle, he's also hurt fairly regularly. So by going back to mandatory camp, is Deebo saying, Olive Branch, I'm in? What is the messaging here I'm supposed to buy into?
I think that the relationship mending to some degree is working. Now, like you said, this is very, very complicated because Deebo wants to be a receiver, a premier receiver in the league. And his evidence that he can be that was the first half of last year. I believe he was second in the league in receiving yards. Now, when he went into that tailback role, sort of became the third wheel in the offense behind George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk when it came to throwing the ball. And so it's pretty clear what Deebo Samuel wants here. Whether or not he winds up getting it, I think, is what's been discussed over the last few months, because at one point, Deebo Samuel was unwilling to talk to the Niners about a contract at all. And so that's the key when it comes to the rebuilding of the relationship. And I think there was an olive branch here that not a lot of people paid attention to. Now, remember, the Niners took two running backs last year, Mitchell and Sermon, right? And, Mitchell obviously played a relatively significant role for a rookie last year. They went back and took another running back out of LSU in the third round this year. So now they've drafted three running backs in the last 2 years. And part of that, my understanding was a signal to Deebo Samuel, we're building depth at running back so we don't have to do with you what we did last year. We were sort of doing that by necessity. So I think there's always going to be an element of do everything in Deebo Samuel's game. I think what the Niners are trying to explain to him is what happened last year was out of necessity, and they don't plan to do it again, which, again, is an important thing to Samuel because for him, it's a longevity issue as somebody who's already had a whole bunch of injuries playing football.
Listen, the Patriots the last 2 years are 17-16, and that's being the number one rated defense collectively last 2 years. Mm-hmm. The world has changed. Okay, the Bengals had a bad O-line and a young coach, and we're a play away from winning the Super Bowl. You need a quarterback, you need weapons. And we see this all the time in sports, that analytics change. You used to need a center. Now you need versatile wings. Like the league changes. And the NFL right now is rewarding teams that have pivoted to offense. Mike Zimmer can coach, fired. Vic Fangio can coach, fired. Belichick struggling. Pete Carroll struggling. I look at Matt Patricia potentially being the offensive coordinator, and I'm thinking, the hell is going on here? You're close to this organization. It feels tone deaf. Forget doing a DC as an OC. This is not a quarterback who can do things off script. It's not a highly dynamic receiving core. The Dolphins and the Bills look like they're moving in the right direction. What do you make of that Patricia story to offensive coordinator?
There's a lot of questions internally. There are questions with people that have been there that are elsewhere in the league right now. I think this is a big time gamble from Bill Belichick. And this isn't one of those where you go to people in the organization and they're like, yeah, everything will be fine. Don't worry. Bill's got it covered. This is different than that. And I think a huge piece of what they've done this offseason in rebuilding their operation has been a result of losing so many people the last 5 or 6 years. In that they're sort of promoting people who aren't flight risks. They promoted Matt Groh on the scouting side to the top position in personnel over Elliott Wolf, in part because Elliott Wolf interviewed for GM jobs in 2 places this offseason, and they didn't go and get Bill Bryan out of Alabama, who would have been the logical choice, in large part because they thought if they brought him back, then he may be gone in a year, becoming a head coach somewhere else. And so I think Bill's trying to build some continuity back into his building and bringing in guys and empowering guys like Matt Groh and Matt Patricia and Joe Judge that he doesn't think are going to leave in a year or two. But I would say it's a pretty significant gamble, like you said, based on where the game is going. And I think, most especially based on where their quarterback is at such a critical point in his career going from year 1 to year 2.
Albert Breer's got to run Monday Morning Quarterback. Good seeing you, man.
All right. Thanks, Colin.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.